you're taking a whole bunch of information and you're trying to dial it down to what's more important. What's your process like for that? How are you doing that?
It's an important skill set, especially when you're teaching for Come Follow Me.
It's so easy to pontificate and do it, but to whittle it down and to get it down to the essentials and make it really, really clear, that actually takes more time.
The reason I kind of started it all was...
Welcome to Teaching Restored, where we get to talk about all the great things about how to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Julie, don't you dare. Julie.
You're trying to bring all this energy and you sound like death.
I know, it's horrible. And you were with me a couple days ago.
I know. But like your inflection was so good. It was just
well, thank you. Muted. It's there. My passion and my love for this is there. My voice is just not. Yeah, whenever I get a cold, well, I don't want to say whenever, but a lot of times when I get a cold, I'll finish with the cold and then my voice goes. And that's just that's the way it is. That's right. And here we are. Look at us.
Everybody's just happy that you don't feel sick, right? Everybody's
just
happy.
Everyone, right, everyone? Yes.
So happy.
Repeat after me. So yes. Thank you. Yes. I feel great. I sound horrible, but yeah. Anyways, okay. So, Julie, little question for you. You know how we're supposed to liken the scriptures unto ourselves?
I did know that.
We hear that all the time, right? And that's really a big thing of, teaching the gospel, especially when it comes to Old Testament. One of the big gaps we have is, how do we liken the scriptures to ourselves? How do we take what we are learning and make it applied to ourselves? Well, sometimes we just focus on, if we're teaching a youth class, for example, we say, all right, how does that work for you? And they talk, well, okay. And we, I think, sometimes forget to bring in kind of the bigger picture of sometimes even families or wards or stakes or the whole church or the whole world and how
kind of what's going on.
Yeah. And how that affects everyone and everything. It's not just, how does it affect you? And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with opposition? Oh my goodness. How does the world deal with opposition? How does the church deal with opposition? How do families and wards? And it's a lot bigger. And I think one of the skills we can learn is how to use it on a more macro level. I think we get too micro sometimes. Does that even make sense?
It does. It's like thinking more about the ecosystem a little bit, right? Thinking more about how everything works together and specifically considering some of the social implications, some of the church-wide implications of things that are going on in the ecosystem, so to speak.
Right. So today, our guest is going to help us do that. Let's welcome our friend, Art. Hello, my friend.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, Julie. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you with us. This is going to be fun today. I'm excited.
I'm really excited as well.
And I'll say that this is a great, I love these kind of conversations that we're going to have today, especially because I've been following you for a while. And then you pop up on our calendar as someone we're going to interview. And I'm like, all right, dude, I know this dude. This is cool. This is really good because I've watched your stuff and I've watched the different topics you bring in. I'm like, wow, man, he knows. Where does he, we'll talk about all this, but where does he get his information? This is incredible. This is, holy cow, how I've missed all of this church news stuff. I've completely missed and I have you're just like plugged in. It's like you have this bat line to the church saying, okay, what's happening today?
I do. Okay,
I do.
Good. I do. Yeah.
Oh, good. So that's your secret. Okay, this is good.
That's my secret.
Just because Kevin knows you doesn't mean that everybody else does. And so can you tell us, Art, a little bit about yourself, maybe how you got started? And specifically, I'm most interested in learning why. Like, what's the motivator, the driver, the why behind what it is that you do. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my page has been dedicated on sharing LDS news. And the reason I say LDS news rather than like Church of Jesus Christ, news is because it allows me to not only talk about what the church is doing and exciting changes or updates within the church, but also the LDS news within the periphery, and LDS
Mm,
people and stuff. Maybe something
Good
that
distinction.
won't appear, yeah, something that won't appear in like the church news or newsroom by, in the Church of Jesus Christ.org. Um, and so the reason I kind of started it all was I was online and seeing a lot of people just kind of saying specifically about church finance, talking about how, well, the church isn't doing this, or the church should be doing so many humanitarian things, or so many, they have so much money, they should be doing this. At the same time, I'm getting like emails from church news of like all the great humanitarian things that the church are doing, and I'm seeing this online, wheelchairs in Africa, you know, um, prosthetics to amputees, and church education and stuff. And I was like, there's a disconnect here. People aren't. This isn't getting out the way that it needs to get out. And so I was like, I'm gonna push this. I'm gonna take the news that the church has, and I'm gonna also share it. And from there, it just kind of has grown and has expanded a little bit. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been like a testimony builder. My testimony is rooted on spiritual things, but seeing the continuous, restoration, as President Nelson called it, seeing that unfold, as well as all the humanitarian things of the church, just makes me proud and makes me happy to be a member of the church. So
That's great. So would you consider yourself, I mean, you talk about news, right? Ish. Would you consider yourself a homegrown journalist, or do you consider yourself a teacher, or do you consider yourself, how do you frame yourself in what you're
good
doing?
question.
yeah, that's a great question. I have no background in journalism, and so I think I might just consider myself as your neighbor sharing gossip,
That's cool.
good gossip, I guess. Good gossip. So, I think that's how I would probably frame myself more so than a journalist. Yeah, I don't want to loop myself in with people that are doing some phenomenal journalism work out there, and so I don't think that I'm worthy to hold that title quite yet. So
But it's cool. So tell me what's different than just like if I wanted to go see something, and I visit the church newsroom Instagram site versus I come to Art's Instagram page. What's the difference in what I'm going to see? Are you giving commentary? Are you assimilating different stories? Like you're going deeper? How does that work?
yeah. So I think what I do is a lot of times I found people just don't have time to sit and read, and that might be a topic for a different thing. I feel like we live in a church that requires us to read, um,
Yeah.
but um, but a lot of people are already online. And a lot of people
Yeah.
are doing that. And what they're doing, if they are reading, they're just reading headlines. And the headlines can be very,
Sure.
very deceiving and can be very shallow. So taking a headline plus a story and condensing it to a 1 minute video, or 1 to 2 minute video, is a lot more ingestible for a lot of members of the church rather than sitting and reading a whole article. So I think that would be the biggest difference.
I fall into that category, so thank
Me
you.
too.
And it's interesting because I've watched other people do that with, political news or with world news or where they kind of are trying to, condense it, but give a fairly, thorough, like high level, but, here are the most important things that you need to know. And that's
Yeah.
actually been a hard skill set because
Yeah.
you're taking a whole bunch of information and you're trying to dial it down to what's more important. What's your process like for that? How are you doing that?
It's tough to figure out, okay, this is what I do want to share, this is what I don't want to share. And it takes a bit of writing down. I read from a script, so writing down the script and then seeing how long it will be, and if it's too long, cutting down on that. And sometimes, I mean, I've had videos where I've pushed 3 minutes, and because I didn't want to take away anything from it. So it is a tough skill set, but I think it's an important skill set, especially when you're teaching for Come Follow Me, because in the Old Testament, because there's going to be weeks where we have 5 to 10 chapters that we'll have to go through, and you've got 45 minutes in your Sunday school class. So what is it that you want to dial down to in those chapters? So um, being able to scrap maybe some of the fluff or some of the unimportant things, or even if it's all important, being able to dial it down to the most important.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you next, is because that is a skill for teachers that is really important. And my mind just suddenly went to, okay, if we want to practice this, maybe we take some headlines. Maybe we do that, take some headlines and then and read the article and then dial it down to the essentials and say, okay, this is, and just as a practice, because trying to do that with a whole lesson, a 45-minute lesson, that's a big deal. But if I can do that with an article that I can read in 3 minutes and then dial it down even to 30 seconds or even a minute and speak about it like that, that's kind of a habit that I could almost get into, like once a day, and it's practice and practice and practice. And that would hugely help, especially with Old Testament this year, I think, because there's a lot there.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Well, what you're saying, couldn't you almost, I mean, Kev, you were just saying that. And from what you said, Art, I was thinking about this. I'm like, why couldn't we write Old Testament headlines? Like, why couldn't that be part of our practice? Like, take the block of reading, say, what are the headlines here? Like, to use kind of a journalist approach, what are the things that are going to make people want to learn more, want to read more? Figure out what your headlines are, figure out what your 1 minute blurb is, because what you're supposed to be doing is facilitating discussion anyway. And so you've got to figure out how to give the right amount of information to create a robust discussion in that learning environment. So why not take that kind of approach that you do, where you really kind of cut the fluff, script it down, right?
It'd be a great, a great teaching tip is to start off with, it'd be great readiness activity, um, to start off the class, putting up a headline, a mock church, a mock news headline of the story, like old man says weather is changing or weather is going to change, be prepared. And for your lesson on Noah or something like that, something to grab people's attention to do that. So,
or make them write the headlines. Like, that's an activity you could do at the beginning of class. Here's our block of reading. What would the headlines for today's,
news
reading be?
And honestly, if we're okay, so assuming we're teaching, I'm going to assume teaching right now in Sunday school in young men's, young women's, right? This may not work with other ones, but we assume that they have gone through a week of learning of this. So if they have done that, if they have done Come Follow Me, they should be able to do the headline exercise, right? Yeah. And that, I mean, I think one of the things that Sunday school and young men, young women teachers have difficulty with is that, for example, the high schoolers, they've gone through a week of seminary and home study, and they're hearing this. And then you come into Sunday school or young men, young women's, and they're going to repeat the same thing. They're like, okay, I know. We've just heard this. We just talked about this. So that's a great way to say, okay, you know about it. Write some headlines. And that's, that could be a really great exercise there.
Yeah. And then adding, 4 questions and then moving on with those 4 questions off of their headlines. That could be your whole lesson plan. If you're really good at it. So
that's awesome. Well, and you teach Institute as well, right?
I do, yeah. So an institute teacher at the Tempe Institute here at ASU. I
Okay,
teach a Spanish institute class. So all my classes are in Spanish for our Latino community here in Phoenix. So and the
that's
valley
cool.
here, the Metro Phoenix. Yeah, it's a lot of
What
fun. I love
curriculum
it.
what curriculum are you teaching right now?
So this semester I am teaching Jesus Christ and His eternal gospel. So
Oh,
Yeah.
got it. Okay,
that's this
so
semester, and it's one of the core classes to take. So if you want to graduate from institute, so,
institute. Yeah, aren't there
yeah,
are 4, right?
absolutely, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm thinking a little bit about, is it Jesus Christ and the Everlasting Gospel or something like that? I'm
That's
sorry, I don't know.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
thinking a little bit about that topic, and then I'm thinking about what you do, with church news.
Hmm.
Do you marry the two?
Always, yeah. So I've been doing this for probably about a year, and last semester we were kind of following doing a Doctrine and Covenants church history class, um, and um, and a lot of things happened. A lot of things happened, and it was amazing to me when that things were happening and how it related to what we were reading that week from Doctrine and Covenants and some lessons that we could pull from it. I think, and this is, I think that a good way to use current events within your teaching is making sure that the current event, using it more as a case study rather than a debate. For example,
Huh.
a very significant political event happened in the fall of last year at at a university in Utah, and that same day I had my institute class, and it would be, I felt it would be, just socially blind for me not to address the huge elephant in the room that happened that day. And
Yeah,
being able to sit with the students in the class that have a wide spectrum of political views and a wide spectrum of views about the issue, and using it as a case study, not asking, well, what's your opinion about what happened, or what's your opinion about what this person was involved in, but rather saying things like, if a disciple of Jesus Christ faced this situation, what virtues kind of would matter most in this? And that way you're looking at the story as a whole,
Wow.
as opposed to a partisan opinion ping pong. Well, no, I think this. Oh, no, no, you're wrong because I think this. But you bring it back, you're able to bring it back to Christ and his attributes that we should be emulating, and how they kind of fit in the world today. So
That's a great way to do it.
yeah. I've never thought about the delineation between creating a discussion around a case study versus opening it up kind of for discussion, which could easily turn into debate because it was a little bit of a polarizing experience.
yeah,
Okay, so this is making me think a little bit more about something that you said. Like it would have been socially ignorant for you to
yeah,
not include that. I do feel, and this is just me, I'm a super direct person. I'm not afraid to talk about things. In fact, I feel like I try and create a really safe, like a psychologically safe environment in the classes that I teach so that we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. I saw Kevin do a
yeah,
tiny smirk because he knows this is like a big thing for me.
I love it.
And and as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about how sometimes I am a little bit socially maybe ignorant. Like I get a little bit micro in my teaching. I want to know what's going on in your heart. I want to know what's going on in your life experience, et cetera. And then I sometimes forget, to Kevin's intro, kind of the macro piece of that a little bit. And I think that what you bring is an opportunity for us to consider the larger community of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and
mm,
the impact, like what you're covering. I mean, I've looked, like you are not just taking on the easy stuff. You are
no,
taking on the tough topics as well.
Right.
And I
yeah,
would love to understand, you know, sometimes it's still going to be like emotional. Sometimes it's still going to be difficult. Sometimes there isn't, a case study isn't going to be the right approach. Talk to us a little bit about how we can be socially appropriate and incorporate in a very constructive way some of these current events into our teaching. Can you kind of talk through how we might process that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there are three things that I think if you're going to kind of incorporate maybe some things that are a little bit more complex into your teaching with what's happening in society. I think the first thing is naming the tension out loud and saying, yeah, this is going to be, there is a paradox here, between what maybe we believe, or what we hear from the church and what we might internalize ourselves. Talking about and naming it out, saying this is a complicated topic, and it's okay to talk about it. So I think that would be the first thing if you're going to bring it up, and saying, what that does is it kind of, it doesn't surprise them, and it doesn't surprise the students in your class. It doesn't catch them off guard, but you're letting them know, hey, we're gonna step into a little bit of a complicated, area within the topic that we're discussing. I think another thing would be, to, like I said before, focus on making it more reflexive rather than opinion based. I think a question that we think is very profound is, what do you think about that? How many times have you been in a Sunday school class and, like, you read something and, like, oh, what do you think about that? And the problem with that question is that it invites opinion, and doesn't invite reflection, right? And so,
Right.
um, uh, a a better question would be something like, what does that reveal, or where do you see? For example, if I was to use something about the shooting that happened up in Grand Blanc, Michigan,
Yeah.
and showing that members of the church, started a GoFundMe for the wife and the child and the family of the shooter. I could, rather than saying, what do you think about that? Because that would invite, people could have different opinions on that. But if I was to say
Invites
something
debate.
like, yeah, it invites debate. But if you were to say something like, where do you see mercy in this story? Or where do you see humility in this story? Or, where do we see agency, or repentance in the story? Or what does this
Mhm.
reveal about human nature versus Christ's nature, and how we should be? So, um, that doesn't, that is more reflexive on how, those Christ-like attributes should be applied into our lives, as opposed to, what do I think? Well, I think that, maybe that money could have been given to the, survivors, or those that lost, um, s- that that can cause the conversation to definitely um, get really divided. So, um, I would say that would be the second thing, and the third thing that I would say is something that I like Mr. Rogers. He said it's essential to be, or how did he say it? It's more important to be simple and profound than shallow and complex, which is it's kind of different than what we think. We think that in order to get profound and get into the deep doctrine, we need to get into the complexity. But Mr. Rogers thinks something completely different. He thinks that there is a profound nature in the simplicity of some of these deep stories. And to just give you an idea, the very first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a story of how Lady Elaine comes into the land of make believe and starts wanting to institute new rules and some changes, right? And King Friday does not like it at all. And so what he starts doing is he starts building up a wall, like a physical wall, to separate himself and his little kingdom, or his little castle, from the changes that everybody is implementing in the land of make believe. And if you think about that, the idea of, metaphysical walls that we put up when it comes to change, or that's a deep concept. It's a deep concept. The Mr. Rogers Neighborhood is aimed at, you know, uh, preschool age kids, from preschool on to like maybe first or second grade. But that is a complex, deep, and profound topic for these little kids to understand, shared in a very simple way. And I think that if we can be good at teaching complex things, and being profound in simplicity, that rather than shallow in complexity, I think that is where we find the Spirit truly becoming a conduit, and between the learner and the celestial. I think that is where the Spirit can really teach. One of my favorite things to do at the end of my class is asking my students, "What did you hear that I didn't say? What was something that you
Great
heard
question.
that didn't come out of my mouth, but came into your mind, during our discussion?" And opening that up and seeing how everybody heard the same thing come out of my mouth, but the Spirit taught different things for them, and then to go and implement what the Spirit taught them personally. And that is a tool that I learned from Elder Bednar. Elder Bednar is phenomenal
Agreed.
at asking that. So
Yeah. That what you're just saying there, especially that third one, reminds me, I think it was Mark Twain who said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry I wasn't able to write a shorter letter to you. I didn't have enough time." Right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Basically,
Right.
yeah. I mean, it's so easy
yeah,
to pontificate and do it, but to whittle it down and to get it
hmm
down to the essentials, to the things, and make it really, really clear, that actually takes more time and it takes more effort to get to that. And that's
yeah,
a skill that can be developed over time, is to how do you take the complex subject and make it really simple and profound at the same time. It's not easy
yeah,
to do, but it's very and I think you're right. I think when we do that, and I've noticed Elder Bednar does that as well. I mean, honestly, a lot of all of the 12 where I've been in meetings, they'll say something and something so simple, and I'll go, "Wow, holy cow, are you kidding me?
yeah,
How have I never even thought of it in that from that perspective before?" And you just said one sentence and you cleared up pages worth of
yeah,
what someone else has said. It's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I love finding the one thing. So when I'm sitting in sacrament meeting, I'm not going to remember everything that somebody said when it came to their talk. But I like their one thing. I'll look for their one thing that somebody said that will then cause my mind to start diving deeper into that. And you'll see me on my phone, but I'm not texting, and I'm not scrolling through social media. You'll see me on my phone, essentially in my mind, writing my own message off of this one line that somebody said in their talk. And then I make it a point to going up to that person and being like, "Hey, I like what you said when you said this. It made me think of this." And that has made sacrament meetings for me a lot more meaningful, and a lot more applicable to the rest of my week that week. I can take what I learned that one saying, and doing that, rather than worrying about a lot of the extra stuff. And stuff like that, and somebody else in the room, in the sacrament meeting room, will probably get something else out of it, that they'll
Sure.
take on for the rest of the week. But for me, I can take what I need for that week.
That's good. I want to just, sorry, Julie, real quick. I would just want to give you props on handling difficult topics. You did some videos recently about handbook changes to abortion. A missionary recently passed away, and I watched those clips and I was like, dude, that was incredibly well done. I don't know that I am not the most empathetic kind of guy, and I Julie knows this, and so sometimes the things I write or say, and I just do it, and it's like, wow, that. And my wife will all the time say, that was a little rough. It could have been said a little bit better. And you did it so well, and I was just impressed with the sensitivity that you brought to those subjects and thinking about things that I would have never thought of before. And from perspectives of people watching, I thought, oh yeah, you're right. Someone may want to hear that piece that I would have never thought of. So
Yeah.
it's a skill that someday I hope to have, because it's a weak thing that may never be strong for me.
Well, I do think that we need both. I do think that there is being able to kind of um, touch those topics, but I think we also at the same time need people to be we need people that are more direct and kind of I think there's a place for it, and I think there's value. And I think that that's another thing that I really like to do as a teacher is say that. I think, say something like, I think there's value in thinking that way. And that really kind of opens up the different lines of, different ways of thinking and looking at different perspectives, whether how it doesn't matter how complex or complicated the story might be, but being able to create a safe space where somebody can express, their view, and saying and having hearing somebody say, I think that there is value in thinking of it that way, and having somebody else that might think something different, completely differently, saying that there's value in the way that they're thinking it, and everybody feels like they have value in being able to to um, to be heard and being able to express their views. So
Dang it, you guys, I have like 4 questions. They're gonna fall out of my brain if I don't just say them, but they're not, they go back. Let me start with the most recent question and work backwards, and then help me
okay.
not forget the questions, and let's see if we can touch on some of
All
them.
right.
So the one that you just said about valuing different perspectives. I have a couple of, I'm gonna get a little, kind of selfish for just a minute and hijack this for a sec, because I've been involved in some conversations with friends who are struggling with different current event issues that have taken place in the church. One particularly with the news about different abuse. One
Mhm.
about, back in the COVID days, the admonition to get the vaccine and how politicized that um, recommendation or a counsel was. And and one of the things I was really grateful for is the fact that they brought it up and I could see the wrestle. I could see the wrestle.
Mhm.
And so there are 2 questions related to that. One of them is, how do we appropriately make space for people to wrestle? You said value different perspectives. Well, guess what? Some people's perspective is going to be one of struggle. And
Mhm.
I think that there's value in examining the struggle and leaning
Mhm.
into that. And as you are coming forward with news, part of what you have to do is consider what you don't know in what you share. And sometimes I think people lean into what they do know and just are almost incapable of considering what they don't, because what they see in front of them with the headline is so emotional that they can't figure out how to grapple with it in a way that considers other perspectives.
Mhm.
So, question number 1 in reverse order is, what counsel do you have as people are wrestling with some of these difficult things? And it can be counsel for teaching your children, like when you're having a one-on-one conversation with them or a friend. But it could also be, do you allow space for that in a classroom setting in a way that can be constructive? Okay, now if I
Yeah.
don't say the other questions, though, they're actually, I've got enough notes. Maybe tackle that, and then I've gotten enough notes that I think I'll remember the other questions.
Good.
Yeah, yeah, no, perfect. I think two things come to mind. Number one, somebody that I consider a very, very good teacher has said you don't want a good faith crisis to go to waste. Um, and
Mm,
uh, and maybe
yes.
your friend is not having a faith crisis, but maybe they're struggling with something, some just one aspect. Hey, I know the church is true, but I really just can't get past this little thing, um, that's okay. I think there's value in realizing that, looking at the faith crisis in the scriptures. I think the church started with a faith crisis, with Joseph
Right.
Smith wondering which church is true. I think a
Good.
lot of examples. You might even say that there was a little bit of a faith crisis in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? So the fact that you have a struggle, the fact that you want things to be different, or you are lacking understanding, you're in good company, number one. And so I think two things: letting the person know that it's okay for them to have those questions, but also for those of us that don't have that same struggle or the same question, um, have making sure that we know, don't get defensive. A lot of times, we'll hear somebody doesn't like something about the church, and members will a lot of times just get super defensive, or will chalk it up to, oh, you just want to sin. And it isn't that black and white. It isn't that you know binary, for a lot of people. So I'd say there's there's that. I think creating that space for people to be able to share that, and just um, listen on that. So I um, yeah, I think that would create a better space for everybody.
I want to reiterate 2 points that you just made. One, don't let a good faith crisis go to waste. And I think
Yeah,
that I'd love to point out the value in that conversation, that dialogue, with that
yeah,
person. But you nailed it when you said that most of us have a tendency to want to lecture when we don't struggle with the same issue, right?
yeah,
That we want
yeah,
to, oh,
Yep.
let me solve your problem, let me fix it. But people don't hear you until they feel you. Like you have
yeah,
to really let them have that moment and do what Kevin is terrible at and empathize with them first. I'm just kidding, Kevin. You're actually not terrible at it. You just call
I
yourself
am
terrible
terrible.
at it.
I am terrible
It
at
makes
it.
me
I
laugh.
am.
It makes me laugh.
uh,
But really, truly letting, like showing them that you're trying to see it from their perspective instead of being so anxious to share your own perspective about it.
yeah,
So add to that, what if it's the teacher that's having the faith crisis about this issue and they're standing up in class? Because I don't want to negate the fact that the people who we're talking to right now wrestle with some of these issues themselves. And I think that you feel the weight of responsibility to not be wrestling, but to come as
yeah,
the stable source of, lean on me type of, facade almost,
yeah,
even when you're in that space yourself. But like, it's
yeah.
okay for teachers, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A great example. Towards the end of last year's "Come Follow Me" lesson, we had section 132 about polygamy,
Mhm.
and we had our Sunday school teacher. I'm currently serving as a bishop in my ward, and the Sunday school teacher called me and said, "Bishop, I don't think I can teach this. I don't think that I am, prepared enough, but also I don't think that I'm bought in enough to be able to teach this." Um, and that was such a spiritual conversation that we then had afterwards, him and I, being able to talk through some things. But one of the things that I think, he was able to share some of his concerns with that theme. And I think one of the things that I shared with him that was really, that we have a problem of doing within the church, I think, is we have two doctrines. We know that this is a doctrine, and we know that this is a doctrine. And they seem to sit in paradox with one another. Um, and what we try to do is we try to fill in the gap or that hole where we don't have the answer. And I think that a lot of what we feel like we believe as doctrine is actually just us filling in the gap, and
Right.
it's not really doctrine. I had a conversation with some members of my family recently of um they got they saw a video on TikTok of somebody saying that we believe that the Garden of Eden is in Missouri. We don't believe that the Garden of Eden is in Missouri. We believe that Adam Diamond is where Adam and his family dwelt after being you know kicked out of the garden. Um, but we were able to have a discussion. We're like, well, why not? They said the same thing about Jesus. What good could come? What good could come out of Nazareth? They found out when Jesus was a Nazarene, right? And so why couldn't it be, what is a more appropriate place? Any place, it would be a weird place if you think about it, whether it's here or in the Middle East or in Europe or Asia, wherever. And so having filling in that gap is kind of where we get into a lot of problems, but I also think that's where a lot of people kind of get hurt. For example, using polygamy, we know that President Nelson is sealed to two people, and we know that when you are sealed to somebody, that you will be with them in the eternities. They're promised to you. So does that mean that there's polygamy in the celestial kingdom? Well, we don't know. We don't know, but we fill in that gap where we don't know, and that is where a lot of people have an issue and fall into that issue. We don't know how that's going to work. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we do know that we have faith in Jesus Christ, and everything that is unfair or everything that is unknown in this life will be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ. So,
It's interesting because I remember when there was what what am I trying to say? Like an administrative change. No, it's not that. It's oh my gosh, not a why can't I find the word? When there was a change where children of a homosexual
LGBTQ,
couple,
yeah.
Yeah.
LGBT community, but what's the word of it's
A
not
policy
it's
change, yeah.
policy. You guys,
Yeah.
I couldn't find the word
You
policy.
forgot the word policy.
I
Awesome.
forgot the word policy. We have problems. You should never be allowed to sit in front of a microphone again. This is terrible. Okay, so there was a policy change, right? And
Hmm.
then the policy changed again. And I
Yeah.
remember a lot of people, like I was at the time teaching an adult religion class, and I was like, it's like you said, it would have been socially almost inappropriate for me to, or ignorant for me to not at least,
Yeah.
bring it up in some way, shape, or form. But I remember as I prayed about how to bring that up, the thing that I was impressed to talk about because of the doctrine that we were discussing in class had to do with the nature of God. And it had to do with, does he love all of his children? Does he, that type
Hmm.
of discussion. And then,
Hmm.
if what we see in this policy does not match what we know about the nature of God, then there's something we don't understand. If it
Yeah.
was revealed and we have a testimony of a prophet, like we have all of these doctrinal principles that we can lean into pretty solidly, and it doesn't match up, we need to recognize that there's something that we don't understand. Can we live with that? Like, does the
Yeah.
nature of God have to change in order for us? Are we going to lean in to the policy and dismiss the nature of God? Or are we going
Yeah.
to lean? I mean, you know what I mean? Like freak out about which part are we going to freak out about? Well, maybe
Yeah.
we can actually say that in this paradox there is a space, and in that space is kind of what we don't know yet,
Yeah.
and it's okay. I'm not
Yeah. And
articulating that very well, but do you see what I'm
no, no,
saying?
I think I think I completely understand what you're saying. And I think if we're going to fill that space with anything, it is always safe to fill it with love and understanding. Um, but not filling it with speculation and
Exactly.
and teaching it with everything like that. And so understanding that we don't know everything, and but knowing that, hey, we can still show love, and we can still create a safe space for everybody. When I got called to be a bishop, I had 2 weeks before I was actually set apart, and nobody knew that I was going to. Just me and my wife knew that I was being called. But for me, kind of along the whole LGBTQ plus theme, for me, one of the things I was kind of wrestling with is, what am I going to say when I have a youth come in and say that they identify as gay or lesbian or whatever, and they're like, I don't find a place for me in the church. So what do I say to that? What is the one thing, or what's the quote from general conference that I could share with them to say, hey, you do have a place here. We do need you. And there were some things, but that came into mind, but it kind of didn't seem adequate. They were never really adequate enough for me personally, and maybe for other people they are. But for me personally, I'm like, but I could poke holes at that too. Um, and then I got set apart, and within the first month of being a bishop, I had 3 youth come in and 1 adult come in and saying that they identify as LGBTQ plus with that exact question. And almost as if it was inspired, I guess you could say, the thought came to my mind. I had a young man, he said, I think I'm gay. And I said, oh, cool. And he kind of sat back a little, and he was like, because he was surprised, and he's like, oh, cool. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I didn't think you would react that way. And I said, why, how was I supposed to react? How are you expecting me? He's like, I thought you were going to get mad, and I thought you were going to say this and that. And I said, look, you came to me and you said that you are something, you think you're gay. Okay, that's great. It's not my place. It would be inappropriate for me to say, no, you're not, or yes, you are, or whatever. That's what you think. That's how you feel. I will honor that. Um, that's not my job. My job is to make sure that you feel like you have a place here. And that was an eye opener for me. And why people stay in the church was going to be different. Yes, we can all stay because we have a testimony of Jesus Christ, but there are people outside of the church that have testimonies of Jesus Christ. Um, why this church? Why this doctrine? Why do we choose this one? Is going to be different for everybody. And it would be inappropriate for us to say, well, you need to stay because of this, or you need to be in this church because of this. No, what our job is to create a space, as teachers or as just members of the church, is to create a space in our classroom and in our pews where somebody can find out why they should stay. They could figure out for themselves why they should stay. And it will always be in connection with a relationship of Jesus Christ. So it might be, I stay here because I feel like needed, and I feel like that brings me closer to Christ. It could be a number of different things, but that's our job. Our job is just to create a space where somebody can figure that out for themselves, why they should stay.
I like that. Personally, I feel like if a teacher, if we are using the polygamy example, if a teacher got up and said, this is a subject that I struggle with, I don't know the answer to, but let's explore.
Yeah.
And then went from there. I'm so cool with that, because we all struggle. And to your point, if we take any of those issues that we struggle with and all of a sudden we feel, oh, I don't have a place here because I'm not on board, or I don't believe it, or whatever it is. No, that's exactly why you fit in.
Yeah.
We
It's
all struggle with something, right? And that's okay. This is a space for struggle. This is what it's all about. Let's struggle together. And good for you for just saying what you struggle with. I love that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm the way I shared it with my class when we were teaching about polygamy is I'm grateful that having a testimony about polygamy is not a temple recommend question.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I,
Right.
it's okay. You can be a fool, you can love this gospel and be not okay with polygamy, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your response to your friend that came in to talk to you about being, identifying as LGBTQ, the "oh cool" thing
Hmm.
to me is it's "oh cool that you are here. Oh cool
Yeah.
that you are talking to me. Oh
Yeah.
cool that we can have this conversation." And I hope that everybody in our classroom spaces feels that whatever they bring up, your response is cool. This is like their
Yeah.
space for them
Yeah.
here.
They're
Yeah.
And
struggling.
when
Cool.
yeah,
Right. And
cool. I
you're
mean, yeah,
here
cool
and we're
is
talking about
struggling.
it. Yes.
Cool that
Yeah.
we're talking about it. And I think when we were talking a little bit earlier, I know that we need to wrap up. And so I'm kind of wanting to squeeze in this one
Hmm.
more little question point, whatever. When we were talking a little bit earlier about how to bring up some of these tough issues without creating debate and with making it space, because you bring up, something sensitive, especially if somebody personally is wrestling with it. For example, the policy related to the LGBTQ community that I referenced earlier,
Hmm.
and you've got somebody in that space who is struggling themselves, trying to feel their way through their testimony and reconcile some paradoxical things that they've got going on. The questions that you ask in that space are going to be critical. And so you were talking
Hmm.
about those three things. And one of the things that you said is the first thing was name the tension, right?
Hmm.
And when you name that tension, somebody who's experiencing that tension can almost take a deep breath,
Yeah.
like we're talking about. And then two, you said focus on, kind of being more reflective. And when you were talking about those reflexive questions, you said, be conscious of the questions that you're asking. And
Yeah.
so as you, for example, are doing this yourself in institute, in another setting, tackling difficult issues, what guidance would you have for a teacher as they're preparing those questions? Because they will be critical. They will mean the difference between a debate and a discussion. They will mean the difference
Yeah.
between somebody walking away with the one thing and the spirit like peace out, the door
Yeah.
because of the nature of what you create. So your role in those questions are critical. So what
Yeah.
counsel would you have for someone in that space as they're preparing?
I'm going to give you a cheat code, and this is
I
kind
like
of
it.
goes in line with
Cool.
with one of the updates that came out with recently with the recent update in the church handbook. Um, Whenever I use Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever to help me formulate my questions. So I know I want this question, but I know that this is not really a good one. So you can ask it to say, make this more reflexive. And what I found is as I get ideas, I might not even use one of the questions, but I have used AI to kind of help me with my own thinking. I've used it as like a, hey, let's talk together. And oftentimes I don't use any of the questions it gives me. I might use part of a question, part of a question here and part of a question there to formulate my own question. But I would say do not be afraid, do not hesitate to use or artificial intelligence to use these large language models to help formulate those questions. I don't use it to plan my lessons. I don't use it to get principles out of anything. I use it strictly for that, for formulating questions. I know I'm going to ask this question. How can I do that? And that falls in line with what the update is and the guidance given to the church when it comes to using AI. So
Okay, I think so many teachers just took a giant deep breath. We're like, oh, thank you. Because
yeah,
that is the
absolutely.
hardest part. Kevin's like, ask GPT, how can I phrase this more empathically? Note to
That's
Yeah,
self, right? Like, I mean,
maybe,
yeah,
really, truly,
maybe. Yep.
that. So
yeah.
thanks for being real about that. That is a really great idea. I
And if I
love
could
it.
give another suggestion, one of the things that I don't like whenever I'm in a class, and they start off the class with saying, "Okay, I want this to be a discussion," right? And they say, "So don't be afraid to say anything." Really, the job of the teacher is to facilitate the discussion. So if you want it to be a discussion, you need to do things to make it a discussion.
Very
And
good.
a discussion is made in the follow-up question. Okay.
Yes.
So you can use ChatGPT to get your question. But that doesn't, you have one question and you say it. And how many times have you been in class where you ask a question and one person answers it and you're like, awesome, thank you.
They move on.
And then
Yep.
nobody else either has a comment or the teacher just moves on. That wasn't a discussion, right? Um, the follow-up question, discussion is made in the follow-up questions. And so, yes, we think about the question, but we don't think about the follow-up question. And that's a little bit harder to plan for because your follow-up question needs to be in line with what somebody said, and so you got to be listening to what they say. Or so it's some simple things that I do to help is I'll say, who else has had a similar experience to that, or does somebody have a different experience, or does somebody have a different idea, or something like that. So um, that follow-up question is what creates the discussion and creates a safe space. If you're able to say, well, who thinks differently? Who thinks that it's not like this? You are now creating a safe space for people to share maybe something that you know, that might not be in line with what somebody else said.
That's really good. Great advice.
I love it. Okay, so to wrap things up, didn't prep you for this one, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If you could encourage gospel teachers, whether it's a called teacher in a calling, a parent, missionary, friend, as we discuss the gospel with our friends and share the gospel, what is one thing that they can do to help become a better gospel teacher?
Yeah, great question. I think the adage of he who talks most feels best, right? And so if you want to be a good gospel teacher and you want your students to feel like they connected with Christ, your classroom, it better be them speaking more than you. And that's when they'll get the most out of anything that you teach. And so what does that mean? It means focusing a lot more on your questions, and like I said, those follow-up questions. It means listening more. Teaching isn't planning a lesson and then following that plan. Teaching is making sure that your student, especially gospel teaching, your student is connecting to that conduit between them and the heavens, so that they can get the lesson that they need out of it. One of my like I said before, one of my favorite things to ask at the end of a class is what did you hear in your mind that I didn't say? And opening that up to everybody. What did you hear in your mind that I didn't say? Elder Bednar is very good at doing that. So, and then allowing them to share and seeing that, hey, I said the same thing to every single one of you right now, but each one of you is leaving with something different. And that is that connection between you and heaven. That is the Spirit saying, this is what you need to take out of this. So
I love it.
Awesome.
So good.
Awesome.
So many great nuggets that we talked about. Thank you very much, Art.
No,
it's been wonderful to have you on, and I look forward to your posts and things I'm going to learn from you as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Teaching Restored. Now, we want you to know that there's more than just this podcast, more than just the discussions that Julie and I have with each other or with other guests that come in. There's a lot more. Let me give you a few things that where we just expand this reach. Number one, there's a community where you can go online and learn from a lot of others and even give ideas yourself. And that is found if you go to leadingsaints.org or teachingrestored.com and look at the community link there. That'll take you to a whole community. And we are a part of the Leading Saints community there, where we talk about, among other things, how to be better gospel teachers. So I would highly recommend you go there. We have some incredible discussions, some real passionate discussions of ideas and different things that we can do to be better gospel teachers. And also we have all of our socials. If you haven't been there, go connect up. We bring in other people's posts that you may not have seen that have great ideas, snippets from General Conference, and just ideas that don't take an hour podcast. They're a lot shorter that we just want to throw out of some good ideas. And then if you would, of course, please pay it forward. Share it with other gospel teachers. That way we can all become more converted, more gospel-centered, and just better teachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ overall. Thanks for joining us in this journey. The team here at Teaching Restored, we so appreciate it. And we love what we do. And this has been a wonderful journey for us. And we're excited about where this is still going. We have more plans to expand the content and expand things out for you. So stay tuned and we'll see you around. Thanks for joining us.